Sup folks. This is the part 1 of What If, Deku, Get Reborn as a Vampire. Chapter 1. At the young age of 4, Izuku Midoriya learned the unbelievably cruel truth that not all men are created equal. He was born without a quirk. While 80% of the population had some superhuman ability, but he was only human. Although he wouldn't be that way forever. He will eventually turn into a vampire. A creature of the night with superhuman strength and speed. However, all of this power comes with a cost. He will have to contend for control over his body and mind with a seemingly unquenchable thirst for blood. His story started the day he met the #1 hero. It started like any other day. He got up for school, which ate breakfast with his wonderful mother. She's such a wonderful mother. Thinks Midoriya', even if she didn't say what I needed to hear back then. His walk to school was slow only so he wouldn't see Deku before classes started. He doesn't want any burns before classes begin because he doesn't want to deal with them for the whole day. When he makes it to school, he walks to his class and then to his desk. His classes go by normally until his homeroom at the end of the day. As third years, you should all fill out these career forms. But who, am I kidding? You all want to go into the hero course, shouts the teacher. The students respond with cheers and the activation of their quirks. Only 2 kids don't activate their quirks, one being Izuku Midoriya and the other being Katsuki Deku. Hey teach, don't lump me in with the rest of these rejects, says Deku after jumping on top of his desk. The rest of the class didn't take kindly to that remark and meet it with their own retorts. Get over yourself, we have good quirks, buzz of Pomeranian hair. Oh Deku, you're going for UAS hero course, right? Asks the teacher. Of course I am, I ace the mock tests and have powerful quirk that's perfect for heroics, shouts Deku arrogantly. Oh hey Midoriya, you're also going for UAS hero course, right? Asks the teacher. What? No way, you can't get in without a quirk. That isn't true. They got rid of that rule so I could be the first, says Midoriya. Deku, do you really think you can keep up with me, worthless piece of shit? Screeches Deku while blowing up Midoriya's desk and knocking him onto the floor. It's not like I'm trying to compete with you. Please believe me. I couldn't even dream of competing with you. It's just that I've wanted to be a hero for so long and I don't think I could forgive myself if I didn't even try, says Midoriya. You're really going to take the entrance exam just to try? You would die at the gate. You cannot become a hero without a quirk, you dumb ass, shouts Deku. Hey Deku, do whatever you want after class, but let me teach the class now, says the teacher. Deku glances at the teacher before shooting one last glare at Midoriya and then walked back to his desk to start the class back up. Once class was functioning again, it was pretty normal. Although Midoriya couldn't help but overhear what his classmates were whispering about him when they thought he couldn't hear them. Once classes were over, Midoriya took his time to pack his bag. While this was going on, Deku and his cronies walked over to Midoriya. We aren't done here Deku, says Deku while grabbing Midoriya's quirk analysis notebook. What you got there? His diary? Says crony #1. Kaken, can you please give that back to me? Asks Midoriya. Hero analysis for the future? You're still on about that shit? It won't work. I'm telling you, the teachers are telling you, students are telling, even your own mother is telling you it won't work. You're too pathetic to take care of yourself, so why would you even think of becoming a hero? Says Deku as he sets Midoriya's notebook aflame and throws it straight out the window. Why? Asks Midoriya. Deku ignores Midoriya's pleas for justification and places his hand on Midoriya's shoulders while burning him. I'm only gonna say this once, don't apply for UA, you damn nerd, says Deku has smoke from Midoriya's uniform and shoulder filters through his fingers. Deku begins to walk away from Midoriya before deciding against it. Oh, I just thought of a way that you could become a hero. Pray you get a quirk in your next life and take a swan dive off the roof, says Deku. Midoriya lets out a low growl and turns to Deku with a fury in his eyes. only to be cut short by Bikku menacingly generating explosions, making it look like he's holding a ball of fire. "You got something to say?" asks Bikku. Midoriya responds with more silence. He's not even going to say anything? I thought that he still had some fight left in him. He's so pathetic, says Krani as the trio leaves the classroom. Yeah, why does he even think about being a hero? It's never gonna happen, says Krani. Whatever the rest of that conversation held in store for Midoriya fell on deaf ears. Midoriya simply stood there in shock for a while before snapping out of his trance and heading home. Why would Kaken say that? If I actually did it, he would be put in prison for instigating a suicide. Not that I would do it. Right? I wouldn't, but I wouldn't have to deal with the soreness or the burns anymore. But I can't do that to Mom. I'll keep living even if it's only for her and not for me, thinks Midoriya before stumbling upon the fried remains of his notebook in the school koi pond. Oh, would you look at that? My dreams are nothing more than fish food, says Midoriya. Midoriya puts his notebook back in his bag and keeps walking home. If I really can't be like All Might, then what can I do? Thinks Midoriya. Well, maybe I can be like All Might in my own way. I can keep smiling just like him. I have to keep smiling. If I don't, then I might not be able to smile again, thinks Midoriya before walking under a bridge. Midoriya's musings are cut short by a loud gurgling sound and a rather putrid stench coming from a manhole. A green blob of a sludge-like substance flowed from the manhole. I had no idea he was in town. I have to find someone soon, says the sludge man. The man makes eye contact with Midoriya and lunges forwards onto Midoriya. It wraps around him and begins to suffocate him, to which he responds by flailing and trying desperately to escape the villain's grasp. Don't struggle, kid, that will only make it worse for you, says the sludge villain. I'm dying. I'm dying. I'm not ready. I want to see Mom one last time. Just 5 minutes would be enough. Please somebody help me. I can't go yet. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I'm already dead. Nothing's gonna save me, thinks Midoriya. Kid, you're my hero, says the sludge villain. Hero? I'm his hero. I might not be able to save anybody, but I will be like All Might, says Midoriya while forcing a smile onto his lips. Smile like him until the end. Fear not, citizen, comes a booming voice. All Might, thinks Midoriya. Texas Smash, shouts All Might. A shockwave comes off of All Might's fist and tears the sludge villain apart as Midoriya blacks out. When Midoriya begins to wake up, he hears and feels a loud, mildly irritating slapping. He opens his eyes to see the symbol of peace and the greatest hero on earth slapping him in the face repeatedly. All Might. I thought we lost you there, young man, says All Might. Holy crap, it's All Might. All Might, you gotta sign my notebook, says Midoriya before picking his notebook up off the ground and opening to a page with All Might's signature. You already signed it. Thank you so much. It will be passed down through the generations. It'll be a family heirloom. Thank you. Okay, well, I have to go, says All Might. Wait, I have so much to ask you, says Midoriya. I'm sorry, but one of the opponents, a hero, has his time, says All Might while crouching and preparing to take off. Midoriya reaches to tug on All Might's shirt to get his attention, and the next thing he knows, he is flying above the city, looking down on the lives going on below, completely unaware of the situation overhead. Midoriya quickly wraps his arms around All Might's muscular legs to prevent himself from falling to his death. Young man, I appreciate the fanatics, but please let go, shouts All Might. I'm sorry, but I have so many questions for you, shouts Midoriya. Okay, I'm gonna land on that building over there, shouts All Might. A sudden pain flared through All Might's body, causing him to utter some expletives. Fortunately for him, Midoriya failed to notice. Shit, mutters All Might. All Might redirects his flight to a nearby building and lands on the roof. I just saw my life flash before my eyes. It was more disappointing than I thought it would be, mutters Midoriya. That wasn't a very bright move, young man, says All Might. Now I really must be going. Wait, shouts Midoriya. I will not wait. Says All Might. I have to ask him. He's the #1 hero. He would know better than anyone else. He'll tell me I can be a hero. Because if I can't be a hero, then what am I still living for? Thinks Midoriya. Can somebody without a quirk be a hero? Can someone without a quirk be like you? It's been my dream since as long as I could remember. I wanted to be like you. I want to save everybody I can with a smile on my face like you. A fearless smile that makes everybody around me feel safe. Says Midoriya, completely oblivious to All Might morphing into a ball of smoke and then deflating in front of him until he looks up and immediately begins screaming. Wait, you're not All Might. Are you an imposter? I can assure you I am All Might, but in this form I'd prefer you call me Toshinori. And about this form, you know how people suck in their guts and flex at the pool? Well, it's kind of like that. Says Toshinori. No way. Says Midoriya. Yes way. And about that fearless smile, you should know that there is plenty of fear behind that smile. I smile to make people feel safe and to trick the fear inside of me. Says All Might. Midoriya felt as if his feet had grown roots into the roof. He couldn't move at all. He was captured by the words of his hero. I need you to look at this. Says All Might before lifting his shirt and revealing an intricate spider web pattern of scar tissue. It's pretty gross, right? I got this 5 years ago and due to enough surgeries to last me a lifetime. I'm alive, but I can only maintain my hero form for 3 hours a day. 5 years ago? Was it your fight with the toxic chainsaw? Asks Midoriya. All Might's eyes widen before he responds. You're rather well informed, but no, it wasn't my fight with the toxic chainsaw. This fight wasn't made public. The symbol of peace cannot be daunted by evil. Kid, there are some villains that are just too strong to beat. So can you be a hero? Sorry, but not without a quirk. Midoriya felt like his whole world was coming down on him for the 4th time today. He knew All Might wasn't done talking and half-heartedly registered that All Might was telling him he could be a police officer or a doctor, but his words fell on deaf ears as Midoriya fell to his knees and began to cry. He didn't know what to do. He spent his entire life trying to smile for the world like All Might, and now he couldn't even smile for himself. When a memory came to mind. If you want to be a hero so bad, why don't you take a swan dive off the roof and pray for a quirk in your next life? I can't live anymore. Not like this. Living like this is worthless like me. People would be better off without me. Mom wouldn't have to cry every day knowing I'm coming home, day after wretched day with bruises, burns and scars. I need to do this, I can't go any further. Thinks Midoriya. When Midoriya looked up, he realized he worked his way over to the edge of the building. This is it, thinks Midoriya. Suddenly a massive explosion shakes the earth, heats the air and manages to distract Midoriya from the jump. He runs down the stairs and out of the building, and only when he reaches the ground does he remember what All Might told him. It's pointless to go. Thinks Midoriya before walking off. Midoriya didn't know where he was walking, all he knew was he wasn't stopping anytime soon. That's what his plan was until he stumbled upon a crowd with several pro heroes in it. Despite thinking it wouldn't get him anywhere, he looked into the crowd only to see the sludge villain. Oh my god, the villain caught kid. Says a woman in the crowd. The villain got out when I grabbed All Might's leg. This is my fault. Thinks Midoriya. Midoriya looks into the crowd before making eye contact with Deku, who is being held by the villain before his breath stops in the middle of his throat and he sprints towards his tormentor in an attempt to save him. Kid, get back here. You're going to get yourself killed. Shouts some pro hero. You again? Shouts the villain. I'll make sure I kill you this time. Midoriya interrupts the slime villain by throwing his backpack into the villain's eye, causing him to screech in pain and anger. Midoriya uses this time to grab Deku from the sludge and throw him to the pro heroes with all of his might. You damn brat! Shouts the villain. Midoriya looks back at the villain only to be met with a powerful wave of sludge hitting him with the force of a semi-truck. Midoriya gets sent flying across the street and over a building. Time seems to slow down through his eyes. He sees All Might burst forward and smash the villain into blobs of sludge. He sees the terrified look of the crowd. Both of the things he had just seen didn't, compared to the look in Bikugu's eyes. He couldn't quite place the emotion Bikugu was feeling. It looked like fear, anger, confusion. But most of all it was apologetic. Bikugu's cruel words flashed through his mind once again. If you want to be a hero so bad, then why don't you just jump off a roof and pray you get quirk in the next life? Is this what you wanted, Kaken? Thinks Midoriya. Suddenly Midoriya feels gravity's effect on him again as he plummets down to the cruel world below him. He lands with a sickening crunch and barely has the strength left to move when he notices some movement out of the corner of his eyes. He sees a tall woman with dark hair, pale skin, red eyes, and glistening fangs. I saw what you did back there. It was a rather interesting show you put on. I have to ask, why did you help him after everything he did to you? Says the unknown woman. The only thing that leaves Midoriya's mouth a wet choking noise and some blood. Right, you can't really talk right now. I'm gonna assume the reason you saved him was because you wanted to be a hero, right? If I could offer you a way to become a hero and the power to do it, would you accept even if you had to lose your humanity? Asks the woman. Midoriya looks at her thoughtfully for a while before deciding to nod and become the hero he always wanted to be. You made the right choice. Now I have to take some of your blood. Although it is all over the ground, so that isn't much of a problem. She jokes before noticing the glare Midoriya is giving her. Next, you need to drink some of my blood. She uses the claws on the tips of her fingers to slice her wrist open and holds her hand out over his open mouth. The last thing he remembers is the unbelievably sweet taste of her blood, a taste so good he could compare it to the nectar of the gods. It was a taste he would So this is it? Thinks Midoriya, this is death. I don't seem to be in heaven or hell. Maybe I'm in purgatory. This isn't so bad. It's peaceful. I wish I could see something. Anything really. This is just pitch black. It's a little boring. I always imagine purgatory as an infinite field of flowing white or maybe silver grass. So what do I do to pass the time before I go to heaven? Gosh, I hope I don't go to hell. My life was already painful. I don't think I could handle a similar afterlife without losing my mind. Oh, I know. I should try to reflect on my life, then maybe I can go to heaven. 10 years ago, Izuku and Izuku Midoriya were waiting for the test results to see what Izuku's quirk would be. Izuku was so excited and happy at the prospect of getting a quirk. He didn't know it at the time, but that happiness wasn't going to last much longer. The Midoriyas walked into the office after being called, only for their hopes to be dashed by the words Izuku never even dreamed of hearing. Sorry kid. It's not going to happen, says the doctor. In the back of Izuku's 4-year-old mind he knew he should have kept paying attention to his doctor, but how could he? He didn't have a quirk. Why won't I get my quirk? Everybody I know has a quirk. Why does everyone get one except for me? Thinks Izuku. Later Izuku would realize that the worst part about not having a quirk was lacking power, but how people reacted to his lack of quirk. It was like a person's quirk was their defining feature. It was like it indicated their worth. Without a quirk he was seen as worthless. His parents seemed to believe he was worth something. Unfortunately for him, he eventually heard what his father really thought about him during one of his parents' numerous arguments, most of which he was at the Bikugu house for. As luck would have it, Izuku was at home for this argument. He still remembers every single word so vividly. He remembered his father's anger, but more importantly he heard how angry Mom got when the idea of giving him away came up. 4 years after, he uses this memory to make himself feel important to someone, even if it's only one person. In Izuku's opinion, she's worth far more than one person. The argument happened roughly 2 weeks after Izuku was informed of his quirkless status. During those 2 weeks his father was cruel to him, even going as far as harming the boy, his boy, and not feeling sorry in the slightest. Midoriya was in his room playing with his All Might figures when the conversation in the other side of the house became loud and heated enough for him to hear. I don't want to keep the little shit. He doesn't have a fucking quirk. Why can't you see he's fucking worthless? shouts Hisashi. "Don't you dare talk about our son in that way," screeches Inko in defense of her baby. "Inko, I refuse to call that freak my child." Hisashi calls out. "Well, he is your child. You are going to have to get used to it and raise him with me," shouts Inko. "I'm gonna try to put this in a way easier for you to understand. It's him or me. Which do you prefer?" asks Hisashi. At this point Izuku had left his room to hear their conversation better. He didn't know why, but something made him hesitant to show himself, so he chose to stay hidden. "I'm sorry, Hisashi, but if that's the way you feel, you need to pack your bags," says Inko. Hisashi stares at his soon-to-be ex-wife in shock before his face contorts into a look of rage. "You bitch. You're actually gonna pick that worthless little shit over me? That's out, boy, Hisashi," says Inko. "No. There is no fucking way. I made that quirkless freak," says Hisashi. "Don't talk about our boy that way," declares Inko angrily. "That's not my fucking kid. Who the hell did you cheat on my with, you dirty bitch?" asks Hisashi. "How dare you? I'm a good person unlike you," says Inko. "Well, you know what, fuck you and your dumb fuck bastard child. If the two of you shits want me gone so damn bad, I'm fucking leaving," shouts Hisashi before walking out the front door, slamming it on his way out. Midoriya didn't know it at the time, but that wasn't going to be the only person to turn his back on him. He also didn't know how often he would be hearing some variations of that man's cruel words. One thing he did know that stands true to this day is that his mother will always love him with or without a quirk. The next betrayal would be committed by his childhood friend, who would take the whole school with him. It happened not long after his father left. Izuku looks back on it and wishes he saw it coming. The more he thinks about it, the more signs there are. It took place not long after his father left him and his mother. "Kaken, please stop, you're hurting him," shouts a 4-year-old Izuku, trying to defend his classmate. "You're really trying to play hero? You can't be a hero, you're quirkless," says Bikugo. "If you don't stop, I'll stop you myself," says Izuku, despite how scared he really is. "I think we have to teach Deku his place," Bikugo says to his lackeys before they beat Izuku up. This wasn't the last time Izuku would get beaten by his classmates. It was only the beginning of his personal hell. Day after day he would get hurt by his classmates, wishing only to be friends or at the very least to be helpful in some way. For 10 long and painful years Izuku would go through physical abuse at the hands of his classmates. He could take the physical abuse, it was the verbal abuse that got to him. It dug its claws in and refused to let go of his mind. He grew up being told he was worthless, and, despite trying for so long, he was starting to believe them. If you wanna be a hero so bad, pray you get a quirk in your next life and take a swan dive off a roof, echoes through Izuku's mind. Maybe he was right. Maybe I should have killed myself, but I guess the outcome was the same. Maybe he was right about reincarnation. If I'm lucky, I will wake up with powers of my own. With Inko, when Inko heard about what had happened to her baby boy, she was shocked, confused, but most of all she was terrified. As any mother should be if their child nearly dies. Inko didn't care about what was happening in the rest of the world, all she needed to do was see her baby. She got to the hospital with a speed that would put All Might to shame and demanded to see her baby. When she got to see him, he looked so pale she would have thought he was dead if it weren't for the nurse's doctor's reassurance that her boy was still alive. She was told he was in a coma and should wake up within a month. So she waited day after day until a week passed. I should have never disregarded his dreams like that. If he died, I would have never got the chance to apologize to him for what I said that day. Thinks Inko. 10 years ago, Inko and Izuku got back from the quirk specialist and Hisashi was out at work. Inko could tell her boy was crushed, but she didn't know what to say. She decided to pull up a video that always put a smile on his face. It was a video of All Might's debut. Inko thought it was scary, but Izuku loved it. She expected to see his brilliant smile return to his face, but was instead met with more tears. "Mom, he's such a cool hero. He always keeps smiling even when it's hard. Do you think I could be a hero too?" Asks Izuku. Inko felt something in her heart break when she saw his face. Her boy shouldn't have that expression on his face. He should be smiling and laughing like he deserves, but instead he is crying. Inko didn't know what to say. What could she say? The only thing that come to mind through the internal turmoil she was dealing with was 3 words. I'm so sorry. Inko wails before embracing Izuku in a loving and apologetic embrace. She regretted what she said to him for years after. She couldn't bring herself to talk about it. She was scared. Scared of seeing that pain in his eyes again. She felt like a coward, like she was too scared to properly raise her own child. Unbeknownst to her, Izuku still and always will believe that he has the greatest mother in the world, and nothing including All Might himself would ever begin to change that. Back to present. As soon as he wakes up, I'm going to hug him and apologize for everything. Thinks Inko wouldn't know until several minutes later, but her boy's awakening was sooner than she imagined. After making sure she was ready to talk whenever he woke up, she began to patiently wait by his bedside as he has been doing for the past week. She heard a low groan come from her boy. All she could do was stare at her boy with her eyes widened from shock. Izuku opened his eyes and glanced around a little bit before making eye contact with his mom. Mom? Izuku says questioningly. My baby boy. I'm so glad you're okay, Inko shouts. Mom, I'm alive. Says Izuku while looking shocked. How am I alive? Asks Izuku. If you'd like, I can answer all your questions while doing my checkup. Says a slightly familiar voice. Izuku turns his head with some irritation and a slight crackling in his neck to see the woman who promised to keep him alive and give him powers. It's you. Says Izuku with a surprised tone of voice. Izuku, do you know her? Asks Inko. I was nearby when the villain attacked. I got him to the hospital. Says the woman. Oh, thank you so much. I don't think I could repay you for saving my baby boy. Says Inko. There is no need to pay me. It is my job after all. Jokes the woman. Well, thank you anyways. Says Inko. As much as I would love to talk more, I need to make sure your boy is recovering fully. Says the woman. Then I'll give you some room to work and be back in a couple of minutes. Says Inko before stepping out of the room. Alright, Mr. Midoriya, I'm sure you have lots of questions about what I told you when we first met. So ask away. Says the woman. Well, I'd like to know your name. Says Izuku. My name is Ruby Ridonite, but you can call me Ruby. Both my first and last name are shared with gemstones. Anything else? Says Ruby. How long have I been asleep? Asks Izuku. You've been asleep for a week. Says Ruby. A week? Shouts Izuku. I understand this is surprising, but please try to keep it down. We are in a hospital. Says Ruby. Right. Sorry. What did you mean about giving me the power to be a hero? Asks Izuku. Well, this is where the explanations get harder. Do you know what a vampire is? Asks Ruby. Like the bat? Questions Izuku. People are so obsessed with quirks they completely forget all about us vampires. Says Ruby indignantly. I'm sorry, but could you please explain what a vampire is? Requests Izuku. Oh right. A vampire is an undead being with some form of powers that differ from vampire to vampire. My powers are mental and let me move things with my mind along with messing with other people's heads. The only real downside to being a vampire is we have to drink human blood exclusively. Explains Ruby. But what does this have to do with me? Asks Izuku. You're a vampire now. States Ruby. I'm a vampire? Asks Izuku. Yup. Says Ruby. What kind of powers will I get? Questions Izuku. Your guess is as good as mine. We'll find out when you first use them. Says Ruby, causing Izuku to deflate a little. Wait. Am I gonna have to drink human blood? Asks Izuku. Yeah, we do. It's why I chose to work at a hospital. I get to take some blood. I probably could have done the same in the hero industry, but that's too much work. Explains Ruby. I can't drink human blood. I was just a human a week ago. Says Izuku. You can try to fight it, but the bloodlust will move your body eventually. I recommend finding something that gets you blood without getting you trouble. Says Ruby. I don't have a choice? How am I supposed to become a hero like this? Asks Izuku. You could just take blood from villains. Says Ruby. How am I supposed to not take blood between now and the time I'm a hero? Asks Izuku. Well, you could become a vigilante. Says Ruby. I can't do that, it's illegal. Says Izuku. Okay, fine. But it's gonna catch up to you eventually. Says Ruby. Well, I'm gonna fight it for as long as I can. Says Izuku. It's harder than you would think, but from what I've seen about your determination, you just might be able to fight it for a while. Any more questions? Says Ruby. When do I get to leave the hospital? Asks Midoriya. You should be able to leave after I finish my checkup. Says Ruby. Okay. Says Izuku, excited to go home because despite the fact he hasn't been awake very long, he already feels like he wants to curl up in his bed and sleep the stress away. Oh. I should give you my number in case you have any more questions about being a vampire. Says Ruby. I normally do have lots of questions. I guess I'm just tired right now. Says Izuku. That makes sense, the transformation process is very tiring, but you should have retractable fangs and claws now. Says Ruby. I should test those later, but I'm too tired now. Izuku says with a yawn. Then I should get to work on my checkup and send you on your way. Says Ruby. After the checkup, Izuku and Inko were leaving the hospital. Izuku didn't think he would be able to stay awake for the entire ride back. He was right. The last thing he remembers before falling asleep was looking up to the full moon shining brightly in the darkness around it. Before Izuku knew it, he was being woke up by his mother so that they could go up to their apartment. Izuku groggily got out of the car and up the stairs to the apartment. Izuku wanted to go straight to bed, but Inka told him to shower first. Knowing that he put his mother through unbelievable stress quite recently, he decided to oblige her. Izuku ran the water for his shower, but when he stuck his hand in to check the temperature, he felt a burning sensation that traveled up his whole arm. He looked down at his hand to see some skin had been burned away despite the water being cold. He didn't know what it meant, so he decided to ask Ruby. Hey, it's me, Izuku Midoriya. I wanted to know if I might have any reactions to touching water? Asks Izuku. Her response was nearly immediate. Don't touch running water. If you want to clean yourself, you need to take a bath, not a shower. Texts Ruby. Izuku took her advice and found no pain in the water. He was finally able to relax. Or so he thought. He felt hungry and he remembered what Ruby said about drinking blood. He tried to walk back to his room but was stopped by Inko. Hey Izuku. Says Inko. Izuku had never felt an urge as strong as the one he was currently trying to fight off. Hey mom. Izuku says, struggling to speak without turning teeth to fangs and doing something he would never forgive himself for. Inko seems to notice his difficulty talking before saying, You seem tired, you should get some sleep and we can talk in the morning. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty tired. I'll see you tomorrow. Says Izuku before heading to his room and lying down. What the hell was that? Is that what I'm gonna have to deal with, thinks Izuku. You could just be a vigilante, flashes through his head. I thought I shouldn't, but if I don't I might hurt someone innocent. I won't make up my mind yet. But I really should consider what she said along with my other options. Which I don't seem to have much of. Thinks Izuku. Izuku tried to sleep but he had trouble. When he finally got to sleep, his brain forced images of him losing control to his bloodlust around his mother. He only knew one thing about what he was going to do next. Chapter 3. Izuku slept for an hour at the most and he was exhausted when he woke up. He wanted nothing more than to crawl back into bed and go to sleep, but he doubted he would be able to if he tried. And he still had to see what his powers were. If he wanted to get into UA, he would need a good grasp on his powers, and the next he had 20 months to find and control his powers, whatever those were. He decided to keep a notebook on anything he discovered. He heard footsteps going up to his door. He heard 2 knocks, to which he replied, Come in. Hi Izuku. Says Inko as she comes into his room. "Hi Mom," replies Izuku. "How are you feeling?" asks Inko. "Despite sleeping for a week I feel tired," jokes Izuku. "Well, try to relax, sweetie. I wish I had more time to talk, but I have to go to work. I already missed a week and my boss doesn't want me to miss anymore," says Inko. "I'll try to relax, but I might go for a walk. Sleeping for a week makes you go numb. Also your boss sounds evil," says Izuku. "Oh, he is, but he pays the bills," jokes Inko. "But I do have to go now, so if you go for the walk don't work yourself too hard." "I'll try not to," says Izuku. "Bye sweetie," says Inko as she steps out of Izuku's room. "Bye Mom," says Izuku. Izuku spent hours lying down and thinking about what happened with the villain, what Bukegu said to him, and unlike before, Izuku found himself being increasingly unforgiving and furious with the way Bukegu treats him. He hopes his vampiric powers can put Bukegu in his place, but he isn't betting on it. He thinks about what Ruby told him about being a vigilante. Where would I even start? What would I do? Would I just go to the bad parts of town and wait for something to happen, then stop it? Thinks Izuku. Actually, that last part doesn't sound horrible. But I still want to be a hero like All Might. Izuku begins to remember his conversation with All Might, and much like before while thinking about Bukegu, it angered him, although not to the same extent. How dare he say I can't be a hero? I saved Bukegu's life when none of the actual licensed heroes even tried. They just sat there and were fine with watching a teenager die in front of them when they had the power to stop it. Everyone there was so busy thinking about their quirks none of them even tried. They all think quirks are so important, but I did what they couldn't, and I didn't use a quirk. Thinks Izuku, who is now livid with the way things went the week before. Izuku got out of his bed and began to pace back and forth around the apartment, fuming at the injustice of it all and the hypocrisy of the heroes. I have to go do something to clear my head. I should try going for a walk, thinks Izuku. Izuku brushes his teeth before thinking that he might have to treat them any differently now that they can transform. He decides to ask Ruby for advice. Do I have to brush my teeth differently now that I have fangs? Texts Izuku. Brush with normal teeth, then do it again with fangs out. Also flex your gums to get fangs and fingers to get claws. Flex again to put them away, replies Ruby. Izuku thanks her and brushes his fangs. He then fills the sink with water to wash his hands as he remembers and still sees what happened when he touched warm water, although the burn seemed to heal and become a scar pretty quickly. He heads back into his room to get dressed in something comfortable like sweats and t-shirt when he comes to the realization that he is surrounded by All Might merchandise, which only serves in ruining his already distressed emotional state. Izuku isn't one for swearing, although he soon will be. Has only one word come to mind at this revelation: damn. Izuku doesn't know what he wants to do with all of his All Might merchandise, but he does know that he doesn't want to see it anymore. He spends a portion of the day removing all of his posters, figures, and All Might clothes into a box in his closet. What he still has left to wear is mostly plain green, gray and black shirts, so he decides to wear a black v-neck t-shirt that accents the lean but powerful muscles that he only noticed the transformation had given him while he was putting on the shirt. I wonder if all vampires are muscular. Or maybe I just got super strength from my transformation, thinks Izuku. He chose to wear a pair of black jeans along with his shirt. Once he had his outfit on, he got his wallet, phone, and keys, and then he stepped outside and went for his walk. He didn't really know where he was going, he just wandered around. He was aware of a numb pain hitting him whenever his skin touched the sunlight, but decided to ignore it and ask Ruby later. He walked by the school, the alleyway where he was first attacked by the sludge villain, the building where All Might told him he couldn't be a hero, and he finally went by the scene of the crime in which he and Bukegu fought the sludge villain. During this time he didn't know how to feel with all of the memories coming at him. He didn't really feel anything at all. Apathy is better than feeling crushed, I guess, thinks Izuku. Izuku decided that it would be a good time for him to head back home. His walk home was mostly uneventful. He didn't expect anything major to happen. So when Bukegu and his lackeys turned the corner, Izuku finally started feeling any sort of emotion and he felt fucked. He didn't know what to do or say. Would they hurt him? Would they give him pity? Would he lose control of his bloodlust and hunger which had started bothering him at some point during his walk? All he knew is the second Bukegu turned that corner and they made eye contact, his day was only going to get worse from here. "Oh, if it isn't Deku?" says one of Bukegu's followers who Izuku doesn't remember the name of. "It is," replies Izuku, trying to be as snarky as possible without getting hurt. "Are trying to be a smart ass now," says Bukegu's other follower, he whom Izuku decided to call Finger Man due to his extendable fingers. "And if I am?" asks Izuku. "Then we'll kick your ass," says the other bully whose name and quirk Midoriya can't remember. "I know you're not gonna kick my ass," says Izuku, causing Bukegu to raise his eyebrows at Izuku's sudden willingness to swear. "You're getting ballsy, you shit stain. Come on Bukegu, let's kick his ass," says Finger Man. "Bukegu's not gonna do a damn thing," says Midoriya while hiding his true anger behind a smirk. "Fuck did you just say?" says Bukegu while gritting his teeth in anger. "I said you're not gonna do damn thing. And do you want to know why?" replies Midoriya. "Alright fucker, tell me why," says Bukegu. "It's because I got put in a coma for a week because I saved you," says Midoriya. "I didn't need you help, shite right?" shouts Bukegu. Midoriya made eye contact with Bukegu and for the first time in his life Bukegu saw that Midoriya was angry. Although Bukegu didn't know the extent of Midoriya's rage, he didn't think he was going to like what he is about to hear. "Well, I guess I'll just let you die next time," says Izuku calmly. At this Bukegu and his followers fell silent. They didn't know what to say to that. Because what are you supposed to do when the nicest kid in school who helps everybody, even those that hurt him, looks you in the eye and says he will let you die? Most would be struck speechless, and for a moment Bukegu was speechless. He soon regained his anger and ability to speak. "Fuck you Deku. I'll fucking kill you," shouts Bukegu. "You already have," says Izuku before he walks off back towards his house. He can hear Bukegu's followers talk about running him down and beating him. He doesn't care. He's taken every beating that they could give him so far and he's always got up and headed home. He hears Bukegu say it doesn't matter and that he just wants to get down to the 7-Eleven and get his protein bars. I honestly expected to get hurt by something today, but I guess the emotional pain from that conversation will have to cover for my daily physical pain intake. Geez, that was sort of morbid. But I guess that's what happens to somebody when they die and wake up. That was still too morbid, thinks Midoriya before deciding to shut off his brain for a little while and just walk home. Midoriya looked down at his phone and saw that his mother would be home soon. He decided to pick up his pace. He made it back home a little while before his mother would arrive. He felt his stomach growl at him and he remembered that not only has he not eaten today, he can't without risking hurting somebody. So he decided to deal with it because he knew he couldn't forgive himself if he sunk his fangs into somebody. He decided to distract himself by watching the news. He saw what All Might had done throughout the day. It didn't help his mood in the slightest. He also saw that the hero killer Stain struck down another hero in a nearby town. That caught his interest but couldn't really help him cope with his hunger. The last thing he saw was a story about a group of 3 vigilantes that were doing work not too far away from where he lived. He heard keys jangle outside the door to his house and realized that his mother was coming home and they had to have a talk about everything that happened. His mother opened the door to find him sitting on the couch. "Oh Izuku, I wasn't sure if you were going to get out of bed today," says Inko. "I went on that walk I was talking about," says Izuku. "How was it?" asks Inko as she puts up her purse. "It was relaxing. I saw Bukegu while he was out walking somewhere," says Izuku. "How is he doing after all of that?" asks Inko as she sits down. "He was doing okay, I think. He was a little quieter than usual and cursed a little less. I think he might be a little shaken but not enough to hold him back," replies Izuku. That's good to hear. Now Izuku says Inko this is it. She's gonna start asking question. Thinks, Izuku wishing he knew what to say to reassure his mother. How are you taking this? Tell me everything. I know you have a tendency to not tell me things so that I don't worry about you. And that's really brave of you, but I need you to be honest with me. This is for your sake as well as mine, so I trust you won't hold anything back from me. Says Inko while maintaining eye contact with Izuku. How I'm feeling? Questions Izuku. Well, I don't really know. I feel so many different emotions but I'm not able to figure most of them out. It's like I'm awake but nothing feels real. Like I'm still dreaming that I can come back, but nothing feels real. I'm scared that my vision's going to fade into darkness and I'm gonna be in the coma again and all of this is going to be a dream. But most of all I feel this new tiredness that I've never experienced before that seems to refuse to go away. Oh, Izuku, that must be so hard to deal with. You shouldn't have to go through that all on your own. Nobody your age should have to go through that. Actually, nobody of any age should have to go through all of that. I'm gonna make sure that you don't go through this alone. I'll be there for you. You're such a good child. When I saw you run towards that villain I was terrified. I thought that you wouldn't be able to do much considering the heroes couldn't, but you did what they couldn't. You had the courage to run at that villain and save somebody that was so mean to you for all of those years. Says Inko. At that last sentence from his mother's speech it occurred to him that she knew the way that Bukegu treated him and how much that must have hurt her. Why you knew? Izuku asks. I've known for a while. I've tried to get Mitsuki to stop him and she has tried to, but they just can't control him. I've spent so much time trying to avoid your problems. Well, I'm done just standing around and hoping things will get better for us. I'm going to be there for you. I'll go and slap Bukegu if that's what it takes. Says Inko with determination. I appreciate that sentiment, but I don't think you'll have to hit Bukegu. I'm done. Do you mind if I swear? Asks Izuku. I'll allow it just because I know this is stressful for you. Says Inko. I'm done taking his shit. If he speaks to me in a degrading way I'll talk back, and if he hits me I'll hit back. Says Izuku. I'm glad that you're going to stand up for yourself, but please, try not to get into fight. Says Inko. I'll try not to, but knowing Bukegu I might just have to fight. Says Izuku. Only when you have to. Says Inko. Only when I have to. Confirms Izuku. There's one more thing I want to talk about. Says Inko. What is it? Asks Izuku. I'm not sure if you remember this, but when you were younger and you just found out that you were quirkless you asked me if you could be a hero. I didn't know what to say. My mind just froze up. All I could say was says Inko before getting cut off. I'm sorry. Says Izuku. Why, you remembered? Says Inko. I remember a lot of things from around that time despite me being so young. Says Izuku. Did you remember the day your father left? Says Inko. Only no, realizing she had been crying for some time. I remember it, clearly. Says Izuku. I'm so sorry. Says Inko. You don't need to be. I remember everything he said, but none of that stuck to me. The thing that stuck to me was what you said. You defended me. You just wouldn't give up on me even when everybody else did. When I had almost nobody I always had you. You sent away your own husband just to keep me. Says Izuku. Thank you for having so much faith in me. Says Inko. You deserve all of it. Says Izuku. Is there anything else we need to talk about? Asks Inko. Izuku briefly debates telling her about vampirism but decides to give that some more time as he hasn't come to terms with it yet. He doesn't know where to begin when explaining it, so he decides to wait until he is ready and then he will tell her. After this talk, Izuku and his mother started making dinner. Izuku didn't know exactly how eating normal food would affect him, so he sent a text to Ruby. What would happen if I ate human food? Asks Izuku. It would completely disintegrate in your stomach and you wouldn't get any nutrition from it. So basically nothing happens. Also food will lose all taste in your mouth or it will just taste bad. It depends on the food, says Ruby, after Izuku and his mother finished making dinner. They ate in silence as they felt everything that needed to be said was already laid out. Izuku found that none of his food tasted bad but didn't exactly taste like anything at all, just like Ruby said. After he finished eating he went to take a cold bath. He put on his pajamas and looked in the mirror, noticing he got a little bit taller. Izuku and his mother usually go to sleep very early, but Izuku decided to lie down, look at the news on his phone, only to see more of All Might. He once again realized how hungry he was and wanted to find another distraction from the ever-present pain that had suddenly spiked. He figured that he should go to sleep soon because there was nothing that he wanted to see. He was about to go to sleep when he got a text from Ruby. "Have you had anything to drink?" asks Ruby. "I haven't drank yet," replies Izuku. "You need to drink soon. If you keep doing this to yourself you're gonna lose control. Don't do something you might regret," says Ruby. "I know I should drink but I want more time," says Izuku. "You don't have more time," says Ruby. "Do you have any suggestions?" asks Izuku. "I was gonna ask you to meet me tomorrow to talk about the powers that all vampires have. We can talk more about it then. Meet me by the hospital around 9 o'clock, says Ruby. "Okay, good night," says Izuku. "Good." Chapter 4. Izuku woke up with a pain in his stomach that refused to go away. He knew it wasn't healthy to avoid eating, but he knew that he would regret feeding himself even if he eventually got over it. He didn't know what to do. He could smell blood from all around him, whether it be his mother's or that of someone in an apartment near his. He decided to get out of bed and look for something that could distract him from his hunger. He brushed his teeth and then his fangs. He took a cold bath hoping to get a distraction in the frigid water, only to find his stomach growling louder and with more passion than before. He looked at his clock and found out that it was still only 6 in the morning. He knew his mother would wake up soon. He was uncertain if he should be happy for a distraction or scared by the possibility of losing control around his mother. When his mother woke up she began to converse with him. "How did you sleep?" asks Inko. "I slept well but I wish I slept more," replies Izuku. "And how are you feeling?" asks Inko. "Stiff. Still shaking up. I think I need to clear my mind some more. I'm gonna go for another walk," says Izuku. "Okay. Take your phone and keep in touch with me," says Inko. "I will. Bye Mom," says Izuku before grabbing his phone and heading out the door. Izuku began walking around. Much like his last stroll, he had no destination in mind. He was panicking a little. Tomorrow is Monday and he doesn't want to spend a whole day at school with Deku. He just wants to find a way to get rid of his hunger that doesn't make him feel guilty to think about. He keeps these thoughts in mind as he strolls for hours. Every hour he texts his mom the name of the street he is on and tells her that he's fine. He walks his way down to a beach that he sees is called Dagobah Municipal Beach Park. The entire beach is covered in garbage but he doesn't seem to notice the smell. He walks into the beach and manages to climb his way up to a chair on top of a pile of garbage that is high enough for him to look out into the horizon and watch the waves come into shore. He can see the water ripple in the distance with influence of the moon overhead. He wonders if the sun feels so much hotter than usual is because of his vampiric body. He sends a text to his mom and ponders his humanity or lack thereof. He decides to work his way down the pile of trash. When he gets to the bottom he hears a loud series of bangs behind him and sees a refrigerator falling on him. He puts his arms out in a desperate attempt to save himself when he finds that the fridge was stopped by his hands and seems to weigh nothing in his hands. "I've got super strength," thinks Midoriya. He tries to push the fridge off of his arms and sends it flying into the pile of garbage. "Holy shit, I've got super strength," thinks Midoriya again. "I've got to test the limits. How much can I lift? How hard can I punch? How hard can I kick? How fast can I run? How far can I jump?" Does this come with added durability? Will drinking blood increase my current strength? Will me avoiding drinking blood make me weaker? Midoriya spent the rest of the day figuring out his powers. He could lift 1 truck loaded with appliances, 1 fridge, 1 washer, half dryer, 3 microwaves, 8 toasters, and a motorcycle. The motorcycle actually still worked, and he made the decision to hide that away in the rocks that people without strength and mobility enhancing powers couldn't get to the top of. Speaking of mobility enhancers, he could jump about 8 times as high and as far as a truck with a refrigerator, oven, washer, dryer, dishwasher, and an entire light pole. The light pole baffled Midoriya. How did it get on the beach? And who left a working motorcycle here? Well, if I did choose to be a vigilante, that motorcycle could be useful. Although none of those thoughts are as interesting as how someone managed to drag an engineless truck out to this beach. Thinks Midoriya. He also found a speed gun. The kind they use to see how fast a pitcher can't throw a baseball. He found out that the fastest he could sprint was 60 miles per hour or 96.56 kilometers per hour. The more Midoriya used his powers, the more he realized he could be a hero. Even if he wasn't a hero or a vigilante or any other kind of crime fighter, he knew he could finally help people. He decided to send another text to his mother before cleaning the beach so that others could enjoy it. It was a split-second decision, but he wouldn't come to regret it. He didn't know what to do with the garbage, so he decided to try to make it take up less space so that he could do something with it later. He crushed some of it so that it was smaller, but he didn't really have a concrete plan set in place. He decided he would have to wait until later. He was working so long that the sun had gone down and twilight had passed. The clouds went away from the sky and stars took their place. He was worrying his mother a little, but since he kept checking in, she allowed it. Midoriya saw that it was getting close to 9 and he knew that he had to take a break to go visit Ruby and talk about vampirism. He didn't want to stop working because work meant a distraction not only from hunger but from his mental turmoil that threatened to overtake him if he isn't careful. He sent his hourly text a little early and got on his way to the hospital to talk with Ruby. He made it to the hospital a little before 9 and waited on a bench near the entrance while staring up at the stars and moon. About a minute after 9 he saw Ruby walk out of the hospital. She began to look around before spotting him on the bench waving at her. Upon seeing him, she walked over and sat next to him. "It's a nice night, isn't it?" asks Ruby. "Yeah, it is," replies Izuku. "Our powers actually become stronger at night," says Ruby. "Oh, that's interesting, I should look into that," says Izuku. "So, have you figured out what your power is?" asks Ruby. "Are all vampires strong enough to lift several trucks worth of weight?" asks Izuku. "No," replies Ruby. "Then I have super strength," says Izuku. "How did you learn about your powers?" asks Ruby. "I caught a fridge that was going to crush me," says Izuku like it's no big deal. Ruby stares at Izuku with a confused expression before saying, "You almost died again." Oh shit. I almost got crushed by a fridge. How have I not thought about this before? Says Izuku with a panicked tone of voice and erratic speech. "It's probably because you found out that you have super strength," says Ruby. "Oh right, the super strength is so cool," gushes Izuku. "Yeah. How did you learn about the thing with the trucks?" asks Ruby. "I spent most of my day testing my powers at the beach. The one downtown that people dump garbage in. I found a truck and stacked about a truck's worth of appliances into the truck bed and started lifting that," says Izuku. "That's impressive," says Ruby. "Thanks," replies Izuku. "So I wanted to get to my main reason for bringing you here," says Ruby while getting off of the bench and taking a couple of steps away. "And what would that be?" asks Izuku. "I want to talk about all of the powers that vampires have. Not just the ones that individuals have. We all have some regeneration. Which is why I can do this and not feel fear for my lungs," she says as she lights and begins to smoke a cigarette. We can also grow claws and fangs as I've previously mentioned. We can turn into bats and also communicate with bats. Now do me a favor and flex your ears, says Ruby. Okay, says Izuku as his ears visibly narrow and point, making them look elvish. Wow, I can hear everything. Yeah, we have enhanced senses. You can wrinkle your nose to smell better. If you wink you see better. If you wink one eye after the other it will be like having super clear eyes with night vision, says Ruby. Izuku does what Ruby tells him before replying. Wow, I have a great perspective of everything going on around me. Also you can erase your presence from cameras. It would be good for vigilantism, says Ruby. How do I do it? Asks Izuku. Just think disappear and to turn it off think reappear, says Ruby. That seems simple enough, says Izuku. You can also turn into a bat, says Ruby. How do I do that? Asks Izuku. Now for turning into a bat, just imagine becoming a bat, says Ruby. Is that all? Asks Izuku. Yeah, it's not very complicated, replies Ruby. Suddenly Izuku is no longer on the bench. He is on the floor as a bat. Try flying, says Ruby. Izuku begins flapping his wings until he gets off of the ground and starts flying in circles before doing loops in the air. Before you ask, we have instincts that tell us how to fly. If we didn't we would have to learn the hard way, says Ruby. Now for turning back, just imagine your old body. Izuku suddenly returns in his vampire form and falls to the ground. Also we can regenerate the damage dealt by small wounds. If you want to heal more you will need to drink blood and you will heal almost any wound on you. The only wound you might not be able to heal is on the heart, but we don't need it to beat, and if you drink enough blood it will heal anyways. If you don't heal it is gonna hurt like hell, says Ruby. That regeneration sounds really useful, replies Izuku. It is, but there are some things that can still kill us. Those are decapitation, having a stake or anti-vampire blade driven through your heart. Also holy blades and silver blades are hard to regenerate from, says Ruby. If holy weapons hurt us, does that mean we aren't holy? Asks Izuku. Bingo. That also means we lose our powers if we enter a church or a cathedral or any place that has been blessed, says Ruby. That seems inconvenient, replies Izuku. Also crosses have a glare when we look at them, so if somebody with a cross fights you, use your ears and nose to find them, says Ruby. I don't think people are going to come at me with a cross, says Izuku. That's a fair assessment, but it doesn't hurt to know these kinds of things, says Ruby. That's a good point, says Izuku. I think I'm running out of things you need to know, although now that I think about it your body will experience some changes, says Ruby. What kind of changes? Asks Izuku. It's like puberty but more aggressive. You'll get more muscle mass. You'll grow more hair and have to start shaving. You'll grow in height. And, says Ruby. Grow what? Asks Izuku. Well, you'll find out soon enough. But I need to tell you that you need to drink soon, says Ruby. I don't know what to do about that, replies Izuku. Do you want to know what I do when I'm stressed or don't know what to do? Says Ruby. What do you do? Asks Izuku. Ruby takes another cigarette out of her pocket, lights it and hands it to Izuku. Why you want me to smoke this? Asks Izuku. I know it's bad for humans, but I'm a doctor and I can confirm that it does no harm to vampires. Which reminds me, vampires can't get sick or get a disease. So you can get all the ladies and not worry about STDs, says Ruby. Okay. That's nice I guess, says Izuku. I try to be the fun and figure with all teenager or children, says Ruby. Well, that explains the cigarettes, says Izuku. Speaking of which, you haven't tried it, says Ruby. Well, what exactly does it do? Asks Izuku. It makes your brain release dopamine, which makes you happy, says Ruby. Oh. And there are no repercussions for me smoking this, says Midoriya. None at all, replies Ruby. Well, I guess I could use some dopamine. But how do you do it? Asks Izuku. You hold the orange part in your mouth and you breathe in the smoke, then you breath out. If you repeat these actions you'll get the dopamine. Also vampires can't become addicted, says Ruby. Izuku tries the cigarette and blows out smoke. I thought I would start coughing, says Izuku. You don't need oxygen so you won't cough, says Ruby. Well, I have to go now. See you soon. Yeah, see you soon, says Izuku. Ruby and Izuku both go on their way home. Izuku texts his mom again to let her know he was out with a friend and that he would be home soon. Izuku was walking home and working his way through a cigarette. He finished the cigarette, made sure it wasn't still burning, and put it in a trash can in the park he was walking through. He kept walking home when he heard a high-pitched scream from the alleyways between the buildings lining the park. Izuku immediately runs to where he heard the scream to see a sleazy-looking man kicking a woman in the ribs. You dirty whore. Give me what I came for, says the criminal. Izuku runs in and grabs the man. He pulls the man away from the woman and the man pulls out a knife. Run, shouts Izuku. The man tries to stab Izuku with the knife, but Izuku had gotten a good sense of reflexes from dealing with Bakugo for years and stepped back to avoid the knife. He then punched the man across the alleyway into several trash bags. He realized that the man was unconscious. The fact that what he had just done was vigilantism barely registered through his mind. The only thing he could focus on was the smell of the blood leaking from the man's mouth. It smelled similarly to copper and the scent was intoxicating. The smell was heavenly in a way Izuku never can and never will be able to explain. Izuku wasn't in control of his body as he shot forwards and dug his teeth into the villain's shoulder. He drank until he was able to stop himself. Midoriya panicked and, not knowing what to do, ran home. When he got home he saw his mom on the couch asleep. He assumed she was waiting for him. With guilt weighing him down he carried his mother to her bed and took a cold bath, trying to wash the blood off of himself long after it was gone. He finally got to bed and he realized one thing about the whole event. He felt alive. He felt happy. It's been so long since he's felt truly alive and he finally has that feeling back. I've got to do that again, says Midoriya before succumbing. Chapter 5. When Midoriya woke up, the events that unfolded last night ran through his head. He could still taste the sweetness of the villain's blood. He could still feel the rush of that fight, and the pride he felt not only for saving a woman but beating a villain, and in just one punch. He never thought he would be strong enough for that in his wildest dreams. He was on a high of emotions, and as soon as that high hit it left just as fast when he realized what he had done. He lost control. He hurt somebody. Not only did he hurt them, he bit them and drank from them. He doesn't even know if he was caught on camera. The thought terrifies him. He's not scared of villains. He's not scared of Bakugo. He's not scared of death. The only thing he fears is disappointing his mother, the one person who has always been there for him. His body feels like it's on autopilot while his mind flies ahead. He manages to register that he has school today. He is eating breakfast while his mom watches the news. He doesn't listen to most of it, but one thing grabs his attention. A new vigilante has appeared in Mustafa. The perpetrator stopped a robbery last night around 9 o'clock. We have footage of the fight, although it doesn't tell us much, says the reporter. The screen shows the alleyway where Midoriya fought the villain. The villain is standing over the woman yelling when he is suddenly pulled to the side by some invisible force. After a pause the woman gets up and runs. The villain swings his knife towards seemingly open air and is flung to the other side of the alley. There is a brief pause before the villain's unconscious body rustles and his shoulder looks like it gets torn open while blood rises and disappears. I activated my incognito mode thing without realizing. Actually, incognito mode is a good name for that. I'll stick with it, thinks Midoriya. While the vigilante doesn't show up on cameras, the woman who was attacked saw and heard the vigilante, says the reporter. The Screen changes to a different reporter outside of the alleyway with a girl Izuku saved. "Can you tell us what happened?" asks the reporter. "I was walking home from my friend's house and the villain asked if I needed an escort home. I told him I would be fine by myself. I turned and kept walking when I heard him step towards me. I turned around and saw him trying to push me, which he succeeded in, and screamed as he knocked me over. He told me to give him my wallet. I told him no and he started to kick me. He yelled something about giving him what he wants. Then I noticed he wasn't standing over me. I looked up and saw the vigilante grabbing him and pulling him off of me. The villain pulled out a knife and the vigilante yelled, 'Run!' so I did. As I was running I saw the vigilante step back, and dodge the villain's knife, and then he sent him to the other side of the alley with one punch," says the woman while doing a punching movement to demonstrate. "Can you describe the vigilante?" asks the reporter. Yeah. He was kinda short," says the woman. "Rude," thinks Midoriya. "He had red eyes. They were like a cat's with a slit, and how angular they were. I couldn't get that good of a view because it was dark and I was on the ground or running away," says the woman. "If you could say one thing to the vigilante, what would it be?" asks the reporter. "I would have to say thanks for saving me," says the woman. "Hey Izuku," says Inko. "Yeah, Mom," says Izuku. "If you ever see something like that, run away." "Okay?" asks Inko. "Of course. That would be scary and dangerous," says Izuku. "Well, as long as you understand, then we're good. Also, you should be getting ready for school, not looking at the TV," says Inko. "Oh right. I'll get back to that," replies Izuku. Izuku goes through the rest of his routine and wonders if Ruby has seen the news yet. Although he's pretty sure she will text him when she does. Izuku grabs his bag and begins the walk to school. As he walks through the schoolyard, he makes sure to keep his head up high. He would normally keep his head down and try to avoid any attention. This isn't to say that he wants attention, he just wants to let people know that he took the worst the villain who beat Byakugan could do and get up and keep moving. As he walked to his first period class, he heard people talking about him. But he didn't care anymore. If they have something to say, they can say it to his face, and if they won't say it to his face, then he won't listen to the cowards. He makes his way to class and actually makes eye contact with students, and for the first time in years he isn't the one shying away from contact. He makes it to his first period and sees Byakugan glare at him as soon as he enters the room. "Deku," growls Byakugan. "Byakugan," replies Izuku. "Hey, what happened to you calling him Kaken?" asks one of the students towards the back of the class. "I'm coming to realize that he doesn't deserve it," says Izuku. "The fuck do you mean I don't deserve it?" says Byakugan. "I mean, nicknames are reserved for friends and you're not my friend," says Izuku. "Oh, you fight and lose to one villain and you think you're hot shit," says Byakugan. "No, I saved you from one villain and I don't need you to tell me who or what I am. That doesn't even mention that you lost to the villain too," says Izuku. "What was that?" asks Byakugan menacingly. "I said, you lost too," says Izuku. "I'll fucking kill you," says Byakugan lividly. "Go right ahead," says Izuku smoothly. Not only do these words stun Byakugan, they stun the entire class, who happens to be shocked silent. "Well, I've asked," says Izuku. "Are you going to do it or not?" Byakugan just continues to stand there glaring at Izuku. Izuku grabs Byakugan's hand and guides it to his own chest and firmly places Byakugan's hand over his unbeating heart. "Your quirk is Explosion. It lets you shoot explosions out of your hand. They hit with enough force to break through boulders and even metals. They could easily blow a hole in my chest, so as I said earlier, go right ahead," says Izuku. Byakugan finally manages to say something. "Are you fucking insane? No, I know that you won't kill me. The reasons being you want to be a hero, I saved you, this isn't a good place for a murder, and even if you did kill me I wouldn't care," says Midoriya before leaning closer and whispering, "Maybe I should pray for a quirk in the next life and take a swan dive off a roof. Bukagu is silenced by Midoriya for a third time since the sludge incident, and Izuku walks back to his seat, making sure to hold eye contact with anybody who looks at him until they become uncomfortable and look away. Midoriya takes his seat near the back and plugs his phone into the outlet so that he could use his phone in class. He wasn't that concerned with how the classes went. He made sure to study ahead because the teachers didn't like helping him. Because of all of his studying, he had a strong grasp of all of the concepts he would need to know for the rest of the year. He stays on his phone looking for some way to get rid of the garbage at Deku Beach. He doesn't notice his teacher start his class, and he doesn't notice the first couple of times the teacher tries to get his attention. Until the teacher tries to use his stretchy arm quirk to whack him and tilts his head to the side out of pure instinct and looks up to meet the teacher's gaze. "Can I help you?" asks Izuku. "Can you share with the class what you find so interesting?" asks the teacher. "Oh, it's just that the leader of the Mustafa school board has a quirkless child, and if he learned how you treat the quirkless children that you teach, he would probably fire you. Especially since you just tried to hit me. Actually, that might lead to an arrest. So if you don't want that horrible scenario to be your life, I would strongly suggest letting me use my phone on class," says Izuku. "Can you pass without paying attention?" asks the teacher, who is now very clearly worried. "Are you willing to fail me?" says Izuku with a smirk. No," says the teacher. "Good. Also, I actually studied ahead through the end of the year because I know you wouldn't take the time out of the day to help me like you would any other student," says Midoriya. "That's good to hear," says the teacher. "Oh, also if I'm not here, mark me as present unless I say otherwise," says Midoriya. "What if your other teachers say something?" asks the teacher. "I'm gonna have this talk with the rest of them, so don't worry," says Midoriya. Him having this talk with the rest of the teachers went well. He also blackmailed some students into not reporting him by threatening to talk to high schools about their bullying. It all went incredibly well, and he had managed to blackmail his entire grade by lunch. He always was smart, but most people didn't know how smart. He spent the rest of his day finding a place to take all of the garbage at the beach and saw something about Hatsune Laboratories needing any sort of electronics or metal for the creation of something he didn't really read. He was just excited to sell it. He knew getting gear for vigilantism wouldn't be cheap. He also considered selling all of his hero merchandise and decided to sell it. He felt if he sold the motorcycle as a vehicle instead of scrap, he could get more for it. He decided to text Hatsune and talk about selling scrap. "Midoriya, hey, I saw your post about needing metal and electronics." He wasn't expecting a fast reply, but he got one immediately. "Hatsune, yeah, I will buy for 10 yen per pound." "Midoriya, how many pounds are you willing to buy?" "Hatsune, Google my net worth." Izuku didn't know where this was going, but was surprised to find that the Hatsune family is a family of the greatest designers for support gear in the hero industry, and she happens to be one of the richest people on the planet. "Midoriya, I'm assuming you can pay for everything I have to give you." "Hatsune, you're right." "Midoriya, where should we meet to discuss?" "Hatsune, I don't want to leave my lab, so I want you to call me." "Excuse me. I have a call to make," says Izuku. "Take your time," says the rightfully scared teacher. Midoriya leaves class and calls Hatsune. It rings for a second or two and then she picks up. "Hey," says Hatsune. "Hi," says Izuku. "Have you heard of Deku Park?" asks Izuku. "You're trying to sell me the garbage." "It's not yours to sell," says Hatsune. "You're right. I just assumed you were like your parents and figured I needed to get your attention before we could talk about anything. What I really wanted was to offer someone with super strength to help you move the garbage, because I'm assuming if you had the power to get all of that you would have already," says Izuku. "I'm listening," says Hatsune. "How about I move all of the scrap into your trucks and unload at your warehouse and I get 8 yen per pound instead of 10, says Izuku. "The highest I'll go is 5, says Hatsune. "Should we meet?" asks Izuku. Today, says Hatsum. What time? Asks Izuku. ASAP, says Hatsum. Okay, but I can't always show up, says Izuku. Izuku pops his head back into the class and tells his last period teacher that he's leaving. The teacher acts like he doesn't care what he does, but Izuku can see the fear in his eyes. Izuku begins to leave the school, but on his way out his principal asks where he's going and the principal gets blackmailed too. The amount of people I've blackmailed today is so high it's kind of funny, thinks Izuku. Izuku got down to the beach to see a big white truck with a trailer like the kind you can get at U-Haul. He assumed that is where Hatsum was, so he went and checked the car and found no one there. He hears some rustling behind him and sees a girl with pink hair behind him fiddling with some of the garbage on the beach. Hey, says Izuku. Oh hi. Are you the strength guy? Asks Hatsum. Yeah, and my name is Midoriya, says Izuku. Okay, Midoriya, let's get started on this and then I can make some babies. Hey, do you want to make some babies with me? Asks Hatsum. Midoriya looks at her for a couple of seconds before so eloquently saying, sure. This is one of my favorite babies, says Hatsum as she lifts a metal orb the size of a baseball out of her pocket. Oh. You call your inventions babies? Says Izuku. Yes I do, says Hatsum, completely missing Izuku's dilemma. Well, let's get to work, says Hatsum. Sure, says Izuku. Midoriya and Hatsum spent a little under 2 weeks clearing the beach, with Midoriya lifting the heavy things and Hatsum lifting the things that don't require super strength. It was sort of a workout for Izuku, and Hatsum was just excited to build more of her babies. Over the time Midoriya and Hatsum spent clearing the beach, they both realized that the other was incredibly intelligent. With all of Izuku's ideas on bettering quirks and Hatsum's technical genius, they made a good team. Izuku also learned that Hatsum was a little bit eccentric. He also noticed that she was always hyper and very dedicated. He knew dedication is important, but he went out of his way to make sure she took breaks because he didn't think she had slept for a couple of days. Izuku made sure to attend some classes just to make sure he knew what they were doing. While Midoriya was clearing the beach, he found somebody willing to buy his entire All Might collection, which was worth a lot more than he had imagined because Midoriya feels rich now. The guy that bought all of it sent a blonde kid named Mirio to pick it up for seemed like a nice guy. He also managed to sell all of the other pieces in his hero merchandise collection. He doesn't hate heroes, but he finds it hard not to lose faith when you fought the villain they were too scared to fight. Eventually Midoriya had to get around to selling that motorcycle. He got a good offer from a man named Grin. They agreed to meet soon and work out a price. When Midoriya got the address for this meeting, he was a little skeptical as it was in the shitty part of town. He then realized that if he was going to be a vigilante, he would need to patrol where heroes didn't. He knew the bad parts of town were the place for him to be. That is how Izuku is finding himself walking through the slums of Mustafa under the dead of night under the pretext of studying at the library to make it look like he was staying ahead of his classes like he always does. Midoriya gets odd looks carrying a motorcycle on his back, and people look at it as if they want to steal it. Thought they decide not to because they believe it's broken, because if it worked, why would he carry it? He finally finds the address for the place and he thinks it looks kind of shitty with all of the broken windows and damaged paint, but he knows it's the right place because the sign out front says Grins. He stepped into the building to see that it wasn't as bad as it looked. It was only one room as the walls had been torn out. It had a desk with 2 monitors, several drawers off to the side, and a safe behind the desk. Midoriya could smell air coming from somewhere, so he registered that there is a secret back way out. He sees a sleazy man in a tacky purple suit behind the counter smoking a cigar. You must be Grin, says Midoriya. You must be the vigilante, says Grin. Chapter 6. You must be Grin, says Midoriya. You must be that vigilante, replies Grin. Midoriya tries not to visibly panic. He makes sure he's ready for a fight by extending his claws and fangs, then he sharpens all of his senses. I'm an information broker. Continues Grin. I want to help you fight villains because you can get rid of the guys that are in my way. Midoriya didn't lower his guard, but he became visibly less tense. If you're a villain, I should just catch you right now. Says Midoriya. I have no doubt that you could if you tried. But you have so much more to gain from me, staying out of jail. Says Grin as he motions to a seat on the other side of his desk. Like what? Asks Midoriya. Well, for starters, if you get me arrested, I'll tell the police that your name is Midoriya. Says Grin. That's enough to stop me, but I can tell you have a lot more reasons, so continue. Says Midoriya. Alright, but before I continue, do you want to smoke? Asks Grin while holding out a cigarette. Okay, sure. Says Izuku as he grabs the cigarette. Grin pulls out a revolver, and before he knows it, he has one hand around his wrist holding the revolver and the other around his neck. Don't do this to yourself. Says Izuku. Grin pulled the trigger and a small flame comes out of the barrel of the gun. That's for lighting cigarettes, isn't it? Asks Izuku, to which Grin nods. Midoriya lets go of Grin and lets him light his cigarette before apologizing. It's fine, kid. I would react the same way if someone pulled a gun on me. I should have said it was a fake. Replies Grin. So what were those other reasons? Asks Izuku while blowing smoke and making sure the smoke doesn't hit Grin. I can get you gear. If you need a uniform, I can get you one. If you need weapons, I can get weapons. I can also point you in the directions of all the small gangs around. Says Grin. That sounds pretty good, but what's in it for you again? Asks Midoriya. I need you to get rid of some gangs for me. Some are in town and some are a bit further. Says Grin. How am I supposed to get around from town to town while dressed as a vigilante? I can't take the train. Says Midoriya. Use the motorcycle. Says Grin. I can't. People will still see the uniform. Says Midoriya. Then would you like to trade the motorcycle for an older car with tinted windows? Asks Grin. That sounds better, although I don't know how to drive. I wasn't sure about working for a broker and I'm still not, but this doesn't sound like a terrible arrangement. Says Midoriya. Great, and about the driving thing, I can teach you. Now there are a few more things we need to work out. Says Grin. Which are? Asks Midoriya. Being a vigilante puts your family in danger. You might not want to live with any family members. I assume you do because of your age. Says Grin. Well, finding a home that will allow a child to pay and live on his own without asking questions will be hard. Says Midoriya. Not if it's at a building I own. Says Grin. That's a good point. I'll have to work it out with my mother. I'll also need an excuse to move out. I'm thinking I call myself your assistant and say I would like to move closer to work. Says Midoriya. Do you think she'll believe you? Asks Grin. I'm sure I can convince her. Also, where's this building? Asks Midoriya. Look at that small house across the street. Says Grin. I see it. Says Midoriya. It's there. We'll have to work out the rent later when you're sure you can move in. Says Grin. I thought me working for you would be enough. Says Midoriya. No. Working for me gets you gear, information, and the occasional favor. Says Grin. So I still have to pay rent. Says Midoriya. Yep. Says Grin. Well, with being a vigilante, going to school and studying to get into U.A, I might not have time to get money. Says Midoriya. Just steal from the villains you knock out. Says Grin. That's fair. It's not like they'll spend money in jail. Says Midoriya. No, they won't. Now, I just have to ask you one more time. Does all of this sound fair to you? I need to know if I'm making a contract. Asks Grin. It all sounds good, but I want to be able to leave the contract. Says Midoriya. That's fair. Now that I think about it, I need to tell you about my ground rules. They'll actually be on our contract. I'm gonna give you a list of people to stay away from as I have business with them and I can't have you breaking ties. Says Grin. Is it gonna seriously get in my way? Or is it a small group? Asks Midoriya. Just the League of Villains. Although I must say going after them is suicide anyways, says Grin. I'll try to stay away from them, says Midoriya. I'll give you pictures later. I also have some other people who I have contracts with, says Grin. Who? Asks Midoriya. Dabi, Toga, Twice, Compress, Spinner. They're actually pretty good people deep down, says Grin. I'll try not to arrest villains who have good reasons for what they're doing, says Midoriya. It's good to see you're not mindlessly attacking anybody called a villain, says Grin. Legally speaking, what I plan on doing is illegal, but I want to do it for good reasons. Some villains are like me in that regard, aren't they? Asks Midoriya. Yeah, they are, replies. Is there anything else I should know? Asks Midoriya. No, but there are a couple of things I should know, says Grin. Which are? Asks Midoriya. What you can accomplish, says Grin. How are we gonna figure that out? Asks Midoriya. Follow me, I'm giving you your first target, says Grin. Tonight? Asks Midoriya. Is that a problem? Asks Grin. Well, Mom should be sleeping, but I wasn't ready for this, says Midoriya. Well, that's I can get a better feel for what you can accomplish, says Grin as he reaches into his desk and pulls out a bandana folded in a mask. Okay, but where are we going and how are we getting there? Says Midoriya. We'll take the car I was telling you about. You can learn to drive on the way there, says Grin. I'm driving? Asks Midoriya. Yeah, says Grin as he pushes a large cabinet to the side, revealing a door. Follow me, the garage is this way, says Grin. Shit. Okay. Fine, says Midoriya as he follows Grin. To walk into the garage to see that it's actually rather large. It holds several vehicles. You can put a motorcycle down now, says Grin. I actually forgot I was holding it, says Midoriya. Then you must be pretty strong, says Grin. I suppose so, says Midoriya. Which car are we taking? This one, says Grin while pointing to a cherry red 1968 Chevrolet Camaro with 2 black racing stripes across the top. I'm getting this car? Asks Midoriya. Yeah, says Grin. Why? Asks Midoriya. 'Cause over the years I've learned to see who has potential and who doesn't. I've learned to see whether someone is a bad person or if they are a good person with a bad life. You've got lots of potential and I suppose your life could use a pick-me-up, says Grin. He's actually a kind of nice person under that sleazy exterior and cigarette smell, thinks Midoriya. Hey, I have one more question to ask. It's been bothering me for a while. How did you know I was the vigilante? Asks Midoriya. I sent a loan shark after the villain you knocked out. He saw what you did and told me. Also, if you're still worried about your identity getting out, you don't have to worry. He got shot to death not too long ago, says Grin. I'm sorry for your loss, says Midoriya. Don't be. He was into kids. I actually planned on killing him myself, says Grin. That's a good choice, says Midoriya as he stepped into the driver's seat of the car. Grin handed Midoriya the keys and explained what he needed to do. Despite this being Midoriya's first time driving, he was good and stayed calm. You know, most people your age panic when driving, says Grin. I think it's calming. I can focus in on one thing and my mind stops moving so fast and just drives along, says Midoriya. Well, whatever's going on in your head, you're really good at driving. You're a natural, says Grin. Oh, thanks, says Midoriya. Did your dad teach you? Asks Grin. I don't remember that much about my father before he left, but I don't think he would teach me to drive, jokes Midoriya only a little solemnly. Kid, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that, replies Grin. It's fine, you didn't know, says Midoriya. Although Grin can feel the tensity in the air, he's certain if he was smoking it would be thick enough to stop the smoke. Grin stops Midoriya from driving around and learning and starts directing him to the villains. The two park the car in an alley and walk out. Can you jump high? Asks Grin. Yeah, replies Midoriya. Grin pulls a mask on and tells Midoriya to do the same. "Erase your presence from cameras and get us on that roof," says Grin while pointing at a nearby roof. Midoriya complies and soon him and Grin are looking down through a warehouse window with 3 people asleep inside. They both noticed that 2 were awake and looking around to make sure no heroes were coming. Grin grabs the window sill and takes a seat on it. "Alright, get to work and I'll see what you can do," says Grin. "You got it, boss," says Midoriya before climbing down through the window and landing behind some empty grates. Midoriya enhances all of his senses and extends his claws and fangs. He looks around to see if any of them have visible quirks. He notices one of the sleeping villains has a quirk that gives him a scaly body with a long snout. Midoriya assumes he's an alligator or a crocodile. He can't tell the difference. He notices one of the awake guards has blades coming from his elbows. Midoriya decides to take out the patrolling guards first. He figures it will be easier to fight the one whose quirk he knows, so he sneaks his way to the villain. When the villain passes his hiding spot, he comes out from behind the boxes and places his hand over the villain's mouth while dragging him behind the boxes and slamming his head into the ground. "That leaves 4," thinks Midoriya. The other guard notices that his fellow villain is missing and quietly calls out for him. Grin leans a little closer to see what Midoriya will do. Midoriya jumps high and far over the sleeping villains and lands on the other villain with a dull thud that he prays didn't wake the other villains. He makes sure the villain he landed on is unconscious before moving to the sleeping villains. He punches the 2 without mutation quirks to make sure they don't wake up anytime soon. When he goes to knock out the villain with the reptile quirk, he's met with a hard tail to his chest that throws him across the room and into the wall with a bang. Midoriya looks up to see the mutant charging at him and jumps out of the way before he's crushed beneath the villain. He thought the villain looked big while sleeping, but no, that he was standing. It occurred to Midoriya that this guy was almost 7 feet tall. The villain charged Midoriya again, but this time Midoriya was ready and he charged back. Midoriya swung at the villain, but he ducked under it and punched Midoriya in the face and sent him stumbling back. The villain assumed he would fall while off balance and swung again, but this time Midoriya dodged by, ducking under it and moving behind the villain. Now that Midoriya was behind the villain, he put him in a chokehold that he's seen heroes use, with one arm around the neck and the other arm around the back of the head to hold the villain in place. The villain uses his tail, but because Midoriya doesn't need to breathe, he doesn't stop him. The villain notices that Midoriya's grip isn't loosening and claws at Midoriya's ribs, leaving long cuts down his torso. Midoriya lets go and punches the villain in the back of the head and knocks him over. The villain tries to get back up, but Midoriya gets on top of him and punches him twice in the face before the villain loses consciousness. Midoriya flashes a smile and a thumbs up to Grin, who responds by climbing down to get to Midoriya. "Not bad, kid. Little sloppy, and I can tell you're untrained, but not bad. Also, how's your side holding up?" says Grin. "It's fine, I heal faster than most people. Small wounds disappear in no time at all," says Midoriya. "How about those wounds?" asks Grin while pointing to Midoriya's midsection. "They'll heal soon and I can bandage them pretty well, or I can do this," says Midoriya before biting the knocked out villains and drinking a bit of each of their blood. "Do you think you can deal with the pain for just a while longer?" asks Grin. "Yeah, I'm used to dealing with pain," says Midoriya nonchalantly, "and although you didn't see it under my shirt, my wounds closed when I drank the blood." Grin looks a little concerned for a second because even he feels bad hurting children. "Alright, well, I want you to meet someone," says Grin. The 2 walk back to the car together and Grin insists on driving because Midoriya's injured. They drive in silence, just both of them blowing cigarette smoke out the windows and watching the city roll by. They pull up to some house and step out of the car. This guy's quirk is knowledge transferal. He's an old retired villain that owes me a favor for making sure he retires without any hiccups. He's going to transfer knowledge on how to fight to you, says Grin. "That's such a cool quirk. And thanks for using it on me, but why me?" asks Midoriya. "Do you know how often it is I get to do something good?" asks Grin. No sir, says Midoriya. It's not often, but if I help you help people, maybe I can ease my conscience even if it's just a little, says Grin. For what it's worth, you're one of the only two people to ever really be kind to me, says Midoriya. Once again Grin looks concerned but feels like he shouldn't push his boundaries until they know Ekother better. Grin knocks on the door. Hey, isn't it like 3 in the morning? Are we sure this guy's awake? Asks Midoriya. Suddenly the door opens and an old man walks out. Grin, you here to call in that favor? I was just about to get to sleep, says the man. Yeah sure, just teach this guy how to fight. Also teach him a couple of languages while you're at it, says Grin while motioning to Midoriya. Sure, says the man before putting his hand on Midoriya's head. There, now bye. The man walks back inside and leaves Midoriya a little confused. Did it work? Asks Midoriya. It won't come to you until you sleep. So let's go back to my place, work out a contract and send you home, says Grin. The two do exactly as Grin says, and Izuku needs to find a way to convince his mom that he needs to move to the shitty part of town for a job. He decides to call Grin at a later date and ask for advice. He's about to head home and sleep when Grin calls to him. You're gonna be one hell of a fighter, kid, says Grin. Midoriya gives him a smile and a thumbs up before heading out.